So let's talk bad guys. So in one of my videos last week, we were talking about how to plot with Save the Cat, and we were talking about Act 2 in particular. And in one of the areas, you have the bad guys closing in. And this is a really long beat. It's important to get it right, but at the end of the day, you do all of this plotting for your main character. You weave in your side characters. You've got all of these different stories being woven together in the middle, and it can become really overwhelming. So let's talk about how you can create somebody's favorite villain. This entire video is going to be dedicated to the important things that you're going to need to remember in order to create an unforgettable bad guy. So the first thing that comes into mind is you also need to be thinking about your antagonist as if you're inside that antagonist's mind. Sometimes whenever you're writing an antagonist, it can be really hard because maybe you're in the very first part of your series and you don't have the big bad showing up. Or maybe you do have the big bad showing up, but no one knows they're the big bad yet. And you can't be, revealing all your cards for the entire series in book 1. But at the end of the day, there's still going to be so many obstacles in that first book, in that first series, that is going to prevent your character from trying to get the one thing they really, really want. Sorry, my hair is wild today. I have tried to tame it all morning and it's not working out for me. Anyway, maybe the main antagonist is the weather and it keeps messing up your MC's hair. I'm just kidding. But my first suggestion is to really look at your antagonist and begin to think about everything that they would do if they were your hero. Think about, hey, this obstacle has come in their way. How are they going to outsmart it? How are they going to outthink it? What would they logically do next? What have they been working on that is ready to be unfolded? Sometimes the best way to make an unforgettable antagonist is to think about who you love. I give that advice all the time on this channel, and there's a reason I do that, and that's because it works, and it's going to work for you specifically. I really personally love a good set of mind games. When it comes to stories, I love the politics. I love the intrigue. I love trying to figure out all of these different puzzles. There are so many themes about a quote-unquote antagonist that I really just enjoy as a human being. And so whenever I created my entire cast of bad guys, because I have a big series, so I got a big cast of bad guys, whenever I created them with my favorite villains in mind. I will always love a very good outcast villain. Take Ursula from The Little Mermaid, okay? Probably the first movie I ever really fell in love with as a child. And Ursula, without a doubt, was completely outcast. And maybe if she was just a little more accepted, maybe if she had some coaching, she would have never become what she became. It's apparent that earlier she used to live in the kingdom, and earlier she never turned into a monstrous sea monster that wanted to destroy everything, right? She eventually became that way because she was an outcast. I personally think the outcast trope has really great potential for gray area as well. Because if you do something a little bit deeper than what Disney did, right, and you really give this villain meaning and strength, you can truly build this constant predicament of, is this going to work? Is this not going to work? Is this character going to do the right thing? Is this character not going to do the right thing? Let's give this character all of the tools to be successful. Let's give them that coaching. Let's give them these opportunities and see what they do. And sometimes they might surprise you. Sometimes they might not. Another trope that I absolutely love is the greater good bad guy. The bad guy that looks at something from an extreme bird's eye perspective, maybe a godlike perspective, and says, you know what, this is the hard thing to do, but numerically, it's the right thing to do. You know, when you're down in the nitty-gritty and you've got all of these things, you've got all of these emotions going, right? You can't see past how you feel, because love is such a strong, empowering emotion. But for someone that can remove themselves from that and be able to look at things from maybe a statistical perspective, I find them genius. Yes, they can be evil, and yes, they're probably going to be seen as evil. But in their perspective, they are so far removed from evil because numerically they have the data that they need to prove that what they're doing is right. Regardless, take a look at a few of your favorite villains. Say, okay, this is what I like, this is what I don't like. It's important to have that clarity before you start your story, before you get into this bad guy's closing in. Because if you don't start with that strong conviction of what your bad guy is, where your bad guy is going, how your bad guy is going to be an obstacle for your protagonist, how your bad guy is going to manipulate a situation so it seems like your protagonist could be the bad guy. My point is, when the bad guys close in, you need to know exactly what your bad guys are going to do. They need to be raising the stakes. They need to be putting the pressure on the protagonist. They need to eventually outsmart the protagonist to get that protagonist in the dark night of the soul thing. I would argue that it is more important to know what your antagonist is going to do before you figure out what your protagonist will do. At the end of the day, if you don't have that structure of what your protagonist is going to have to overcome, it's going to be difficult. You know, people build this beautiful introduction to their story. They might even go all the way up and have this amazing midpoint. They might even have this amazing midpoint twist. But if they don't continue to escalate the story by raising the stakes, by making the bad guys really close in, by putting the pressure on the protagonist, it's not going to do anything. Something that I don't see often talked about is stacking antagonistic forces. And now this is really important whenever you're doing a longer series, but I also feel like it can be done in a standalone novel as well. The first thing that should be an antagonistic force is going to be your character's flaw. The next thing that should be the antagonistic force should actually be your antagonist. But it doesn't just have to be this one person. It can be a slew of people that have different ideas and different perspectives, and they're going to attack the protagonist in different ways. You know, one genre that does it really, really well, or two, the video game community stacks antagonists really well. And then the anime genre really stacks antagonist well. And so what do I mean by that is sometimes remove yourself from novels for just a minute. Look at the real world. Whatever you want to look at that you see is a bad thing, how deep does it actually go? You know, one thing as a mother that absolutely terrifies me is that this pedophile ring that we're seeing kind of unwind and unfold is so much bigger than I ever dreamed of, right? I hope that's not the case, but I'm afraid it might be the case. But imagine how many people there has to be to make something like that work. And it doesn't just have to be the bad person, right? You have to have so many people that are just turning a blind eye to it. And the more people that are involved, the more powerful people that are involved, the more powerful people are turning a blind eye to something like this, the more impossible it feels to truly go after something and to truly defeat it. So when you're building your antagonistic forces, don't let it just be this one bad person. Don't let it just be your character's flaw. Those are great starting points, but it needs to be deeper than all of that. There needs to be a rabbit hole that your character has to go through and discover, oh my gosh, this is so much bigger than anything I've ever imagined. And if you can get your character to that point, then you're going to get your readers to the point of like hopelessness almost. Like, how is this character going to overcome this? How is this character going to do this? I feel hopeless. They have to feel hopeless, right? And so I know it's hard to build so much into your story. I know you've only got so many words that you can do this in, but imagine the depth that can come from something so much bigger than that initial, oh, we're the big bad and you're gonna defeat us. So you have to ask yourself, is what I have in mind, or is what I've already written, is that really cutting it? Is this really epic, or is this something that is generic? Is this something that is predictable? Is this something that is going to surprise my reader, or is this something that's going to excite my reader? In addition to just people, you need to also think about power. How is your antagonist going to be more powerful than your main character? And I'm going to caution you, and I'm going to bring in a very common example of brilliant bad guys. And it really doesn't matter which one you look at. I kind of think they're all brilliant in their own specific way. And in fact, I tend to enjoy the villains more than this particular superhero. Don't hate me. Don't hate me. It's true. And that's the Joker in all of the Batmans. And specifically, the last two Jokers were just really incredible for one reason. They had more power than Batman, but not because they had more money than Batman, not because they had more allies than Batman. It was for totally different reasons. They didn't have the same resources that Batman had, but they still were more powerful. And especially in the last two, they really dug into this, and they did it in completely different ways. So with Heath Ledger, right, he even admitted many times in the movie that he didn't have the resources that Batman had. Yet he was able to be extremely creative and extremely intelligent with how he attacked. That he appeared to have way more power than Batman. And I'll be honest, I think he had several wins in that specific movie, even if he didn't come out the conquering victor. Many of the themes in that movie were to the Joker's benefit. All right, so the last Joker, I can't remember the actor's name. It's Jace Phoenix. It's not Josh. Anyway, Mr. Phoenix, we'll go with him. The actor that played in the last one first was an incredible actor, and if I ever become incredibly rich and famous and there are movies or shows based off of my books, he's one of the people that I want acting, without a doubt. I adore him. But my point is he had the most interesting Joker. And it's not a movie that I would watch over and over and over again, but it was definitely a movie that I found to be more interesting than most movies that come out. It's because of the power of people rallying behind someone. And we see this often with protagonists, right? And we see this, with protagonists, whether it's Katniss Everdeen in The Hunger Games or America in The Selection. You see how the power of people rallying behind someone is just super insane. But you never think about it when it comes to an antagonist. If people follow someone with these wild beliefs, how is that going to affect your story? Usually you see it with religion. I think religion and science are, for the most part, the best thing that's ever happened to this world and the worst thing that's ever happened to this world. And it just depends on your perspective, because people can manipulate science, right, for good. They can do cures, they can help people, they can make people's lives easier and more convenient. Or they can do it in a really negative way, like creating the atomic bomb. And the same goes for religion. I mean, there's so many amazing things that come from religion, in my personal opinion. I'm a very spiritual person. And on the other side, there are so many bad things that have been done in the name of religion, right? So my point is when you see these like desperate followers, you think of this like hardcore religion usually. But there's so many different ideas and beliefs, especially in the world today. And so I find the Jokers in particular, all of them, to be really interesting bad guys. And I think that they are that way because they use power that isn't your common power, right? Usually the bad guys have a massive star fleet, or the bad guys have a massive army, or the bad guys are all-knowing. And it's so much more interesting when you make your villain based off of something just a little more wild, right? All right, that's everything I have on the subject for today. If you got any questions, ask me in the comments below. Otherwise, I am super happy to see you. If you are interested in having more tips and techniques on your storytelling, please come check out my channel. I am Zoe Marley, and it has been wonderful being here with you today. Bye!